Okay, we're starting.
Crazy horse, we hear what you say. One earth, one mother. One does not sell the earth, the people walk upon. We are the land. How do we sell our mother? How do we sell the stars? How do we sell the air? Crazy horse, we hear what you say. Too many people standing their ground, standing the wrong ground. Predator's face, he possessed a race. Possession, a war that doesn't end. Children of God feed on children of earth. Days people don't care for people. These days are the hardest. Material fields, material harvest. Decoration on chain that binds. Mirrors gold. The people lose their minds. Crazy horse, we hear what you say. One earth, one mother. One does not sell the earth, the people walk upon. We are the land. glimpses now and then. Dream smokes touch the clouds. On a day when death didn't die, real world time tricks shadows lie. Red, white, perception, deception. Predator tries civilizing us.
Hello, greetings, happy day to you. Hope you are well. Hope you are reaching your highest level of mental, physical, and spiritual well being today. And we are glad that you have decided to join us for this week's episode of Our Ancestors' Voices, a weekly program sponsored by the All African People's Revolutionary Party, the AAPRP. And again, we thank you for joining us. Our critical topic this month during Women's History Month, we are paying tribute to Carlota Lucumi, a warrior for the people, a Yoruba woman who was kidnapped from Nigeria by Spanish enslavers and was kidnapped and taken to the island country of Cuba in the Caribbean, where she was put to work on the sugar plantation in the town of Matanzaas, the Matanzaas Sugar Plantation, where she led one of the most successful slave revolts in the history of the Western Hemisphere. And her slave revolt, along with several others like the Haitian Revolution, of course, were responsible for turning the tide and making the colonizers realize that the institution of chattel slavery was not sustainable. So Shakura is going to be giving you a fantastic presentation on that today. And so we're glad that you've joined us to get that information, that very valuable information, because the old saying is true. If you don't know where you came from, if you don't know your history, you can't understand where you are. And if you don't understand where you are, you can't have a vision for where you need to go. So thank you again for joining us, and we give honor and respect to the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. I believe it was John Trudell that Shakura was playing, who, of course, was a longtime indigenous activist in this backward country, one of the leaders for the American Indian movement for many years, made his physical transition some time ago. So we give honor and respect there. And of course, our African ancestors. And we want to dedicate this program today to our Baba Sekou Neblet, who made his physical transition 6 days ago in Tema, Ghana, which is Tema is a area outside of Accra, Ghana, the capital city of the country of Ghana in West Africa. And if you don't know Brother Sekou's history, you should know it. He was a great contributor to the struggle for African liberation. He started out as a singer for the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, or the SNCC Singers, as they called them. And the SNCC Singers were responsible for inspiring the sit-in participants in Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, Georgia, etc., to maintain their courage in engaging in the sit-ins and the freedom rides on the buses that were consistently attacked by racists. So he was a SNCC singer. His job was to inspire the masses, and they did that. And often they were attacked, but they never stopped singing in an effort to inspire our people. And then from there, Brother Sekou, who's known as Chico then, was one of the many Africans who made the transition from SNCC to the Black Panther Party to the All African People's Revolutionary Party. And Brother Sekou Neblet joined the Black Panther Party and became a field marshal for the Black Panther Party in the Massachusetts area here in the United States, and did that for a couple of years before moving on home to Africa, where he served as an active cadre for the All African People's Revolutionary Party for many decades. And he was certainly a big brother, a mentor, a confidant for me. Several times I went to Ghana, at least 3 or 4 times. Each time I did, I stayed with him, including the most recent time that my wife and I went in 2024, stayed at his house, and just always had, just always felt at home with him, and could talk about anything. And, he had an understanding of our struggle, and he certainly had sacrificed and had been victimized by having the courage to stand up for our people. So he understood. And so because of that, I could always talk to him, and he will be greatly missed. So, as always, the way we honor our elders who become ancestors, or any African of any age that becomes an ancestor, is that we, especially when they become an ancestor because they spent their life contributing to our struggle for liberation, we know that we don't honor them just by talking about them. We honor them by continuing their work. And I knew Baba Sekou very well. And I know that he would be saying to me, and he would be saying to you right now, if you could hear him, and if you listen closely enough, you can hear him. He would say that the best way you can honor him is to continue to wage this fight. And he would say, not just any fight, but the fight for one unified socialist Africa is the solution for the problems African people face worldwide. I would go around with him a lot in Tima and Accra, and everyone knew him. He was 82 years old when he made his transition, but he had spent his the last 50 years there, so everyone knew him. And when we would go to the marketplace, people would call him One Africa. That's what they called it everywhere we went. One Africa. Greetings, One Africa. So he was known for wanting to see Africa united and socialist. He was known for that. And he was a great comrade, and we will miss his physical presence greatly, but we will continue to strive to do honor to his legacy. So with that, I'll do the quick introductions and then turn it over to Shakura. So, as always, we say that our Ancestors' Voices is sponsored by the All African People's Revolutionary Party, the AAPRP. And the AAPRP is a revolutionary, independent, mass Pan-African political party based in Africa. And our objective is Pan-Africanism, which we define correctly as one unified socialist Africa. And our work to achieve Pan-Africanism is outlined in Kwame Nkrumah's Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare, the cover of which is portrayed on this page. And our Ancestors' Voices is a weekly program that we sponsor each week by myself, Ajamu, and my biological, ideological daughter, Dr. Shakura Umi. And before I turn it over to you, Shakura, I just remembered from your comments, one funny story about Baba Sekou is one of the other field marshals in the Black Panther Party, D.C. Cox or Donald Cox, wrote a book. I can't remember the name of the book, but I've read it multiple times. And as is the case in our organizations, everybody's not going to get along with everybody all the time. So in that book, he talked about Baba Sekou, and he talked about how he had issues with Baba Sekou, and there were questions about how the money was spent in the Massachusetts area in the Black Panther Party. And he wanted to let Baba Sekou, who was known as Chico, then know that he didn't agree, and shut him down. And this is what he wrote in the book. You can read the book yourself and read that. But when I spent time the last time with Baba Sekou in 2024, I asked him about it. And just speaking to the honesty and the integrity of his character, I asked him about it, and he said, "Yeah, I did mismanage the money. I didn't know how to handle no money, so I mismanaged the money." And I said, "Well, how did you do that, Brother Sekou?" And he said, "Well, a white woman came to the office there, the Black Panther Party office, I guess in Boston, and she said, "What can I do? I have money. I want to help." And he said he told her, "Well, we need a car. We need a good car, a reliable car." So the white woman went out and bought a Corvette. And that jibed because in the book, DC Cox was saying that Baba Sekou was driving around in expensive cars, but he didn't buy that car with with Black Panther Party funds. But she bought the car, and he was further honest. He told me, "I took the car out. I didn't know how to drive a high performance car, and within blocks of the office, I totaled it, and then went back and called the white woman, and she bought us another car." So, just I mean, his honesty was refreshing, right? He admitted, like, I screwed up, which kind of just completely took the wind out of what Brother Cox was writing about in the book, kind of like painting him as irresponsible and, even criminal to an extent. And he was like, "No, I just was disorganized and dumb." So, Baba Sekou, rest in power. And with that, to talk about our wonderful sister, Carlota Lucumi, I will turn it over to Shakura.
Thank you. Appreciate you. Greetings, everyone. What's going on? So, we are going to jump right in. I'm super excited to have the opportunity to talk to you all today about Carlota. I think that we have mentioned her before a couple of times, but I was hoping to kind of bring a little bit more of my time on the island into more of what I learned about her while I was there so that we can talk about that. And so, just to kind of frame this a little bit, again, like we have to acknowledge that because of the Cuban Socialist Revolution, a lot of systemic oppression, such as white supremacy, racism, and even patriarchy, have since been completely totaled in terms of zero tolerance. And so, not to say that they are completely eradicated and it doesn't exist anymore, but there are policies and procedures in place to recognize those kind of behaviors and the harm that they do. Children are learning about racism and white supremacy. Obviously, we've talked about their curriculum being embedded with LGBTQIA so that they can have more awareness and sense of self when it comes to interacting with queer individuals. So there's a lot of preventative measures in place so that the Cuban people not only can be prepared, but so that they can be aware of how their actions have consequences, and more importantly, what is acceptable behavior under a socialist practice, especially when it means not relying on behaviors that have rolled over, excuse me, from the capitalist practice. And so we can even acknowledge that, when we think about the fact that, again, when we spoke to the prime minister, she told us that one of the ways that the country deals with being anti patriarchal and anti sexist is that all non male people belong to the Women's Federation of Cuba organization, which I still think is fantastic and fabulous. And so, literally, if you have strategies in place to help organize a group of people that are traditionally more likely to be oppressed, like that's one way to kind of push against the same oppressive system that is trying to bring them down. And so that's what I would start the slide off by saying is that women in Cuba have played a very crucial role when it comes to fighting for the society that we all know about today, but yet we may not know as much about those really instrumental leaders who have kind of paved the way to bring us to where we are. It's important to acknowledge the names like Victor Drakey, to acknowledge the names like Antonio Maceo, absolutely. But it's also important to acknowledge the names like Fermina and Carlota Lucumi, right? And so, like, just having those conversations and kind of pulling that in. We also must acknowledge the efforts of African women when discussing the progression and advancement of the Caribbean society. Carlota of Lucumi, Yoruba, is how we would refer in terms of thinking about the background. Comrade Baba Jamu mentioned, the Yoruba background and was captured from Nigeria. And we also want to even take into account how we can even start to break down what her contributions have been, because obviously the other enslaved Africans that she was instrumental in helping to save, but also working with to plan how they were going to plan their revolt in the first place, they didn't all come from Nigeria. So even this idea of what it means to work together, and in spite the fact of tribalism and other things like that, I just think it's important to really think through what that looks like, and more importantly, to understand that there is a greater purpose for Carlota. And I think she understood that. I think Fermina understood that. And I'll talk to you more about them in just a moment. There were several issues that came up. So we don't want to paint the picture for you that this one slave revolt was the end all be all. There were several oncoming and forthcoming issues that came up, several confrontations that came up and arose between enslaved Africans, the plantation owners, and even the slave system itself. And Matanzas was one area where that was very prominent. And it was very clear that that was an issue, specifically between the years of 1843 and 1844. We can get even more specific and say that in July 1843 through August of 1844, those were very critical times for the uprisings. And one of the ways that Africans used communication was by way of hearing the drums. And so we've talked a little bit about that in previous seminars where we talked about ways that we not only were trying to hold on to our connections and our cultural practices, but we also were trying to think about ways that we could communicate in a way that wasn't easily recognized, that wasn't easily detected. Obviously, we're trying to be as below under the belt as possible. We don't want to draw attention to the fact that we're about to do this uprise and about to do this revolt. And so the talking drums was a way of doing that. And literally, like, the drums were communicating and talking and telling the others, this is the time is now. Meanwhile, the plantation owners had no idea whatsoever. They didn't think anything of it. And it was just a normal day that they heard drums going, and that was that. So there were two other folks of Lucumi Yoruba origin, a man by the name of Evaristo and a woman by the name of Fermina, who were known also because of their sugar estate and Karna. And they were tasked with encouraging the people to rise above the plantation owners and to fight for a better way and outcome. So what happened was there were a couple of different times that Ervaristo and Fermina were punished because they had been doing all this different work and all these different approaches, I'll say, to try to organize the Africans to push back and to resist. So Fermina was punished, and she was recaptured and shackled and even left in isolation on August 2nd of 1844. As of November 5th of 1843, the enslaved people of the sugar plantation broke out in a great rebellion. And it was Carlota who organized with some other folks, and they knew that they wanted to figure out a way to really make an impact. They wanted to really leave this on the ground, and they wanted to really allow more people to not only acknowledge that it was possible, they didn't have to stand for the conditions, but they also were in a position where they were able to fight back. So Fermina was able to be released, and then she continued to do her work, and she was organizing again for the people to stand up. She got captured again and was shackled again. And this time, right before the November 5th riot on November 2nd of 1843. I think I said 44 before. I'm sorry. It was 1843. This time, because she had been arrested several times, Carlota organized with some of the other enslaved Africans, and they made a plan on how they were going to break her out. And I think when I was doing the research of this, it reminded me of just thinking more about how we have always been organizers as African people. We have always been strategic planners. We've always been builders, and we've always needed to figure out ways to help our kind, because we understood, just like with so many other stories that we've talked about, folks needing to be broken out because they were wrongly accused, and because of that, positioned and sentenced to terms that they didn't need to serve out. I'm thinking of Assata Shakur, for example. And so we could even move forward in terms of thinking about, you had Carlota, who was working with the other enslaved Africans, and their objective was to help Fermina to be freed and to be broken out. And they were successful with that. They also were able to kind of organize further, and it was the 1843 riot, where you've probably seen the famous picture, I'll show you in just a minute, of Carlota holding the machete. That was because of 1843 and that uprising within the Viato sugar mill in Matanzas. That was the one where her, Fermina, and Arvaristo were unfortunately met with their fatal outcome, because that is the riot that is most talked about. And so, again, just kind of painting this picture that there were several smaller ones that led up to this one. And so that was the one that unfortunately they met their fatal outcome. It's also important to kind of think about how, in order for Carlotta and the others to help break out for Mina, they actually had to travel from Chur Viarto to Encana. And so, even just kind of thinking about what it meant to be undetected, what it meant to be unseen, like I said, there was several details that needed to be incorporated for this plan to be successful, and they did it. It's also important to mention that because of this time period between 1843 and 1844, there were several guerrilla attacks of rebelliousness among other Africans in the area in general. So, like I said, word was starting to get out. People were starting to hear about what had happened at the sugar plantation, and other Africans were becoming inspired. They were becoming influenced, and of course, that's a good thing, because we want to be able to help people see that the circumstances are possible to be changed as well. That's literally why I think we keep showing up for Cuba as an organization, is because we understand that Cuba has been able to achieve something that is completely unheard of and unspoken of, literally sustaining a socialist environment. And if you're not careful, the propaganda within this country will teach you that it doesn't work, that it's not successful, and that you shouldn't even try to work on it. But we also know that that propaganda exists for a reason, because they can't afford, the US government, I'm saying, can't afford for more people to really start to research and understand what socialism is. They can't afford for people to see that it's actually one of the best systems that exists, because in that space of it being a transitional period to communism, we're in a better position to start to acknowledge how humanity has been left off in terms of profit being more prioritized. And so I think, just in thinking about how resilient Cuba has been with their accomplishments to have socialism and to achieve socialism, we also need to think more about what that means in terms of Carlotta, in terms of Fermina, in terms of other ancestors who have also been doing that. And again, their legacy, their sacrifices contributing greatly to what was happening with the building up of Cuba being able to achieve its independence, right? And so, just kind of bringing all of that together, it's also important to think about how they helped comrades break chains and freeing comrades from all types of areas known as the Sabanilla del Encomendador, the Guanabana, Santa Ana, belonging to the sugar estates. We have San Miguel, where there were revolts taking place, the Concepcion, San Lorenzo, San Rafael. There were just so many others. And even the coffee and the cattle estates were being attacked, because people were starting to revolt and free from those as well. So that's really important to think about, like I said, because of this idea of kind of passing that on and showing people that it really is possible, showing people that it's not a dream, showing people that with effort and organization, anything is possible. And more importantly, you don't have to suffer alone. You can, collaborate and be camaraderie with your comrades and be able to find a way to have a better outcome. I do want to say that the QR code you see on the screen is actually a link tree to the Venceremos Brigade. So I wasn't able to fit it on the last slide. We actually have some other things on there. So I am going to hang tight here for just a second. I hope that you all can scan that so that you can get some more information about not only the Venceremos Brigade, but also how one of the sites, I should say, that the December Brigade makes a priority to go to is, in fact, the Carlota Museum in Matanzas. And so, again, like, just being able to experience that, I think if I had gone on a different brigade, things could have been different and I still could have had an amazing experience. But I'm really, really happy that one of the settings that we were able to visit was, in fact, the museum. And I actually have a very short video really quickly to show you in the next slide. But again, I'm just trying to hang tight to allow you all space to grab that QR code. So I'll also say, before I move forward, two of the things I'll say that I remember most about the museum is the fact that the statue is one of the first things you see when you drive up. And it was established in 1966. And so, again, that statue has so much legacy and it has so much integrity and bravery and courageousness and principle to it. And again, like when we think about leaders, like I really think we should start to shift. If we're trying to be anti patriarchal and if we're trying to be socialist, we should start to shift and think about what it means to say the other names of people that we may not usually be speaking about. If you don't know very much about Carlota, I don't think you should just depend on us to teach you about her in less than an hour. I think that you have a responsibility to kind of take this information and to still try to build on it, still try to grow, still try to research your own and figure out just who she was and why she was such a force to be reckoned with. But I think at the same time, I also have that responsibility. And I have the responsibility to try to share with you what I was able to gather while I was on that trip. And so that was one of the first things that really stuck out to me was the statue. And then the other thing is when we got off the tour bus and we went into one of the rooms where they had different artifacts and things that were also stolen from West Africa and by the Spaniards. And so, um, there were different instruments that we saw in casings. There were different weapons that we saw, different satchels and things that different colonizers had worn that they took with them before they left. And then after we left that room, we walked out towards to see the statue outside, and we stood there for a good amount of time. I tried my best to, pay my respect. I had a little water and I poured out a libation. And then after that, we walked back onto the museum part of the setting, and we walked into a different room that had names covering up all four walls. And these were names of Angolan, African Cuban fighters who had gone to Angola to help fight for the war. And so, just kind of taking all of that in, it was very overwhelming because, again, like when we think about the fact that Fidel Castro and Malcolm X were able to meet not once but twice, once in Harlem and then once in Cuba, and then seeing the statue of Malcolm X in downtown Havana, that was just really, really mind blowing. I did also see the statue of Martin Luther King, but there's statues of him everywhere because he wasn't as much considered to be a troublemaker or a militant troublemaker, whereas Malcolm was. And so I was really, really happy to see that. And I think it's even the same with seeing these walls of African Angolan Cuban fighters. Like, how humbling is that to just be in a room where you have nothing but honor and respect for the people who sacrificed and lost their lives so that Africans could have a better chance of being free, so that Africans could have a better chance of being able to live a life that they deserve, full of dignity and respect. And Fidel Castro understood that. That's why he gave them weapons. And he said to them, if you want to go home and fight, you have Cuba's support. We have your back. And whatever you need, just let us know. And even thinking about that now, I get emotional. I get emotional thinking about that because I think that that's such a beautiful thing. And it's important if you don't know the background, if you don't know the history or the herstory or the their story, this is where you can start to lose your sense of self because you're not really sure about what you're talking about. And so just saying that to make that point, like I just couldn't even take it in. There were walls of names, and it was just overwhelming in a very positive way. So I do want to say that I am going to move forward. Feel free to reach out to us if you still need this QR code. I do have some other QR codes that are also connected to the week of action. That is this week for Cuba. If we stand with Cuba, we should be participating in the week of action, but we will definitely share this QR code with you if you didn't get a chance to get it. All right. All right. So this next slide is the video that I was telling you about. It's a very, very quick video, like very, very quick, just 38 seconds, I believe. But a comrade was able to just kind of record their experience when they went to the museum in Matanzas. And so I just wanted to show you what their perception of this experience looked like. And again, it's important to mention that we as a collective with the Venceremos Brigade, we all agreed that we would not take photos while we were there. The responsables took photos, and then they were able to consolidate the pictures and put them all on a drive, and then they shared that drive with us. But I do think that it's important to explain that once again. I said that in my report backs, but it bears repeating. We made an agreement, you all, not to practice individualism as much as we could while we were on the island. Once we got back to the US, we were trying to still hold that accountable, but definitely while we were on the island. And so, if the agreement was not to take any photos because it's a threat to the Cuban people's safety, it's a threat of providing geopolitical radiuses and um, tracking points and things like that. We don't want those kind of things to be provided. It's already a limitation on where we could stay and what we could stay, excuse me, what we could say about where we stayed. There's so much limitations with that because even though you can travel through license, if you are a US citizen, you're still limited on where you can purchase things, what you can bring back into the US country, as well as where you can stay while you're on the island. And so I just think it's important to say that because we agreed collectively that we weren't going to take any photos so the responsables could determine which photos were safe and appropriate that did not give other information and details that we don't want to give in these photos. And so even me showing you this video from someone else, I still want to stress the solidarity of that. I want to stress the fact that until we can fully show up for Cuba and support them, the Venceremos Brigade, in my opinion, is doing everything correctly because we have the responsibility of protecting Cuba and protecting what they have worked so hard to build. They have obviously shown up for us, so we need to show up for them. And one of the ways we do that is by not being selfish and individualistic and taking our own photos because we want to capture these moments. I would have loved to take the photos that I would have wanted to capture, but it's not about me. This is something bigger than me. And I'm going to continue to stress on that because until we all learn that, we're not going to be able to really do the kind of organizing that we need to do. We have to look at this bigger than ourselves. This is why we have to care about the fact that our indigenous comrades are being harassed. We have to care about the fact that Asian descent comrades are being harassed. We have to care about that stuff, even if you're not indigenous, even if you're not Asian. If you are a male identifying person, you have to care about the fact that non male people are being harassed. We all have to care, you all, because this is all of our planet. And we have a responsibility to look out for one another. It's not enough to just be like, well, that's not happening to me, so I don't care. That was never a good idea, but it's certainly not a good idea now because they already have plans in place for how they're targeting each and every one of us. Even poor European descent white folks, they're coming for you next. They already have come for you. So like we have to get past that. And also like who can afford to be selfish nowadays? None of us can. None of us can. So like there's that too, okay? All right, so I'm gonna play this very quick video. Abapa Jamu, can you hear the drumming? Can you just confirm that, please?
Yes.
Thank you. All right. So I hope you all enjoyed that. Just literally kind of giving you a walkthrough of what the ground looked like. And so just thinking about how sacred that space was, and also just kind of giving you an idea of really just how beautiful it is there. It looks like I froze up. Okay, hopefully I'm back. Yeah, but just giving you an idea of how beautiful it is and what that experience was like for me. All right, so we're gonna keep it going. I think I'm back now. Okay, yeah, I'm not freezing anymore. So we're gonna keep it going. So as I said, this statue, and just take in this scene too. Take in the scene. Like I'm actually kind of glad that the responsables had to capture the photos, because I don't know if I would have been able to get this like this. I don't know if I have that photography eye, if you will. This is such a beautiful picture to me. Look at the sun going down. Look at the trees. We have the statues there, but we also have the energy. You can just feel the energy from that photo. Or maybe it's me because I was there and I'm biased. But yeah, I just think that's such a beautiful way to represent what we did. So anywho, as I said, these statues were established in 1966, and actually, the governor troops implemented a massive and unethical persecution, not only of Carlota, but also of Fermina and Carlota's companion Eduardo, as well as Fermina's companion um, and Varicio. And so this is actually really grotesque and really brutal. I should also mention that Eduardo is of Fula descent, but the way that they were brutally murdered, you all, was very grotesque and very brutal. And I want to highlight that because I think just like us highlighting and in just like us remembering that Edgar Megar's coffin was open, like we have to talk about the things that make us uncomfortable. I don't think it's enough for us to skate past it because we don't want, to be discomforted. We don't want to experience that. Like, I think we have to talk about those things. And I'm just so happy, even to this day, that his mother said, I want the world to see what they did to my baby. And so I do want to say that, if you have a hard time hearing grotesque things, then maybe you should take space and do what you need to do. Trigger warning. But I think it's important to say this because, again, like, she's our ancestor for a reason, and we need to show up for her even in the conditions that are uncomfortable for us. So because of the several different organizing attempts, not attempts, because of the several different organizing successes that Carlota had, because of the fact that she kept helping Fermina to escape, because of the fact that they were able to do the largest slave revolt of 1843, Carlota was captured during an unequal battle. The repressive forces tied her to horses, and they were positioning each horse to run in a different direction. To run in opposite directions in order to destroy her body completely so that she would be unrecognizable forever. Fermina was shot and killed in March 1844, along with several other Lucumi and Yoruba people, as well as 3 Ganga colleagues. Again, it is important to talk about this. And I think that even in me getting upset right now, that's a good thing because that means that I am still holding on to my humanity. That means I acknowledge that that is messed up and no one should have to die like that. And again, you have to ask yourself, but why? Why was she being killed? For freeing people who never were supposed to be enslaved in the first place because no one should have to experience enslavement. That's why she was killed. Like, that's the question, you all. I don't want us to talk about this and to say, well, she shouldn't have been doing that. She should have minded her business. No, that's exactly the problem. That is the problem. We need to get more invested in doing what is right because it's the right thing to do. Carlota had several other comrades who knew that they were dealing with wrong situations and mistreatment, and they experienced too much harm to understand that they needed to do something about it. So we should be applauding her and we should be saying her name to recognize what she has done. We should be teaching other people about her. Like I said, if you don't have enough information about her, maybe it's time that you do some more research. We should be sharing her name with other people, putting her name on t-shirts, making t-shirts, and sending the money to the Venceremos Brigade. Not keeping the profits for yourself, but sending the money to the Venceremos Brigade because they are asking us to send people to them who might be interested from the US to go to the island and to experience socialism for themselves. So I think it would be a very closed circle moment, full circle moment for us to now have this impact of what Carlota has done for us and then to help raise proceeds that can then be sent back to the Venceremos Brigade for them to keep requesting that people come. That is the whole purpose of the Venceremos Brigade through the Institute for the Cuban People of Friendship, is to get people from the US and take them to the island so that they can experience the beauty of socialism, flaws and all. That is what that experience is supposed to be like. So, yes, I think that we should continue to say her name. I think we should continue to give honor to all of our ancestors. And I think that even in saying Carlotta's name, we also have to think about our other ancestors, Lucy, Anarcha, and Betsy. In case you don't know those names, those are three African enslaved women who were brutally and exploitively, subjectively experimented on by James Marion Sims. And you probably know his name because he was credited as being the father of gynecology. The problem with that logic, though, is he was only able to get that title because he brutally and consistently experimented on my ancestors. So he does not deserve credit. That's a classic thing in capitalism where you have the person who has done the harm and you have the victim. And a lot of times people don't know and talk about the victim because we're so busy talking about the person who did the harm. But instead, what we need to be doing is talking about the victim, or in this case, the persons who literally paved the way for gynecology to be what it is. And again, like, it doesn't matter how you identify. If you're a straight person, you should be supporting queer identities, you should be supporting queer politics, and you should be supporting queerness because we know that the oppression that they experience is vastly terrible and also microscopic compared to what straight people interact with and encounter. So there's that. The same goes if you are a male identifying person because gynecology impacts every single one of us. That's how we're all here today. That's how we're all listening to me talk right now. I am here because of gynecology. Okay. We are all here because of it, regardless of what your gender is. So I think that that's really important to mention because Anarcha, Bessie, and Lucy were three enslaved Africans who were experimented on a regular basis by James Marion Sims. For 4 years in the state of Alabama, he experimented on them at a particular plantation because he wanted to understand better about he started off his research because two of them, Betsy and Lucy, were having issues. They had both just given birth and they weren't able to urinate because they had given birth. And, you know, at that time, the plantation owner, you know, didn't really have the knowledge medically to help them. He just knew that he needed them to get better so that he could make them, you know, keep reproducing because that was one of the roles of African women at that time was to produce children that could be turned into enslaved Africans. Like that was the role, right? So if they are not able to give birth, then they are considered no good. And so then the outcome is a fatal outcome, right? And he didn't want that necessarily. So he contacted James Marion Sims. James Marion Sims was one of the few doctors at that time in the South, but really in the US, who was able to specifically focus their specialty on reproductive gynecological care. So he traveled from wherever he came from. I don't remember because it doesn't matter because he was a loser, but he traveled from wherever and he went to Alabama and he started researching them and he figured out what the issue was. There was a tear in the bladder area and he was able to fix it. Mind you, this was before anesthesia, okay? This was definitely before asking consent. This is before the IRB and the Institutional Review Board. Like, this is before all of that. He just did what he needed to do and they were able to start giving birth and doing labor again. But then he got greedy and selfish and he talked to the plantation owner and he was like, hey, I'd like to actually do some more research. I want to know why this would happen if I were to do this. Can I continue to experiment on your property? And the plantation owner, excuse me, was like, yeah, no problem at all. And so he continued to do experiments on Lucy, for example. He did 35 experiments on her. And you all have to understand, again, like, it doesn't matter what your gender is and how you identify. Like, we all have somewhat of a concept on a basic level of pain. He was literally pulling her nerves, you all, trying to figure out at what point she was experiencing agonizing pain. And because of that terrible individual, that is where the racist assumption of African women having higher pain tolerances, that's where that came from. So he's literally pulling at her nerve. I mean, if you don't have a vagina, just think about somebody pulling your tooth out of your mouth, because that's where your nerves are as well, just to kind of give you an idea. Okay. He's pulling at her nerve, trying to figure out at what point is she going to break down. And, he didn't allow her to sit down. She was standing, and I guess her legs were straddled based on his notes. And, he's pulling, and she's obviously like in agony, but she's still standing. So, by his calculations, by his notes, he's saying, literally, you can look it up. I put it in my dissertation. He said, well, the old girl, she's still standing. I thought that she would have caved by now, but she's still standing. And that's where that came from. So now, if you're an African person, especially if you're an African woman or a non-male African, when you go to the doctor and you tell them this hurts, this is why they might gaslight you. It's because of him. It's because of that fool. That's why. Okay. So I just think it's important, like, to just say their names for real, because like obstetrics gynecology was literally created because of them. It's because of him that we have the speculum. And if you have a cervix, you know what I'm talking about. You know what a speculum is. So, like, just really important to kind of have these conversations. This is why I said we should be saying their names, Anarcha, Betsy, and Lucy, because they are the reason that the rest of us can get tested to make sure that we don't have cervical cancer. We can get tested to make sure we don't have ovarian cancer. We can do pap smears because of their excruciating pain. It's because of my ancestors that we all can benefit from that. And again, if you don't have a cervix, you came from somebody with a cervix. So you still benefit, which means you should still be showing up for my African ancestors. Okay. We all owe them everything. Okay. We don't even have time to talk about Henrietta Lacks. Don't get me started on how she has impacted all of us, right? So, like, these are just some things to kind of think about, especially when it comes to how these ancestors paved the way by being assaulted and by being experimented on, by being brutally attacked, by being beaten, by being pulled, by being probed. All of these things have come to us having a better understanding of how the progression, not only of obstetric gynecology, but even gynecology itself. And so this is why, if you see the slide, you see the image of the three of them on the statue, and then there's their faces in the bottom right. But this is also why they are considered the mothers of gynecology. And I do think that that is a rhetoric that I think we should be practicing more and exercising more. I also just want to mention that if you're still with me on this slide, then you see the National Network of Cuba has put out their flyer for the week of action. So March 8th through the 15th, we are showing up for them. You can definitely go to the National Network of Cuba's website. If you want more information, you can also just Google Week of Action, NOOC, and March 8th through the 15th, and something should pop up. But there's several different things that we can do to support and to stand with Cuba during this time. I'm going to continue on. I had to actually add an extra slide in here because there's so much activity that is going on specifically because of the week of action. So we also want to give I'd be remiss, and we want to give honor to talking about even some more work that is happening. So there's even a call of consciousness where, if you want to join the Cuban people sign assault against Cuban people, you can either check out the link there or you can scan the QR code. There's also a petition that's going around to kind of help prevent the assault on the Cuban people, as well as a petition that is speaking more to some of the other work that other organizations in conjunction with the Venceremos Brigade are doing to support this work, and as well as falling in with the week of action that's taking place next week. So again, I do think that, and us talking about Carlota and Fermina and talking about Eduardo and talking about and Vermicito, we should also kind of just be thinking about how their legacy, their sacrifices paved the way later, much later, for Fidel to, grow up and decide, hey, I really want to organize against this. I don't like this. This is wrong. I'm sure that the slave revolts word was getting out even to our comrades in South America. And so Ernesto Che Guevara even heard about what was happening. And this is kind of paving the way for all these revolutionaries to be a part of this. And I also just wanted to mention, it was our comrade Fred Hampton who said, you might be able to kill the revolutionary, but you can't kill the revolution. I meant to say that on the slide where I got emotional talking about how they killed her and murdered her, really. But I think that that's even important to mention because, you know, her spirit has still lived with us and still continued to showcase and progress. You know, the comrade who recorded the video obviously was so proud to put it on YouTube because of what that experience meant to them. And so I think even in us thinking about that, yes, they were very, very savage and very brutal in how they murdered her and took her life, but also her legacy prevails even past that, right? Her legacy will continue to move on and will prevail no matter what. And so, even in us thinking about the devastation of that, this is why we still have the opportunity to push past that and to help her carry on. We have the responsibility of learning about other names that we probably don't know about. If that was happening in Matanzas, what other parts of Cuba were slave revolts happening? If it was happening in Cuba, what other parts of Haiti was it happening in? And who are those people? What are their names? What parts of the Dominican Republic was it happening in? What about Jamaica, right? Like, this is why we say, you all, that, you know, African history, specifically in February, is only centered around capitalist US Africans. And that's the biggest contradiction that I have with it. And why I have a serious issue with it is because it doesn't even acknowledge African people everywhere. It's very US centered. And that's problematic because Africans everywhere have contributed to us having a better way and quality of life. So, this is why, as an organization, we say to you, you should be challenging yourself. You should be challenging your children. Anybody can name 5 African people who were born on US soil, but how many of us can name 10 African people who were born outside of the US? How many of us can do that? And take note to how many of the people you do name are male identifying. How many of us can name 5 non-male Africans who were born outside of the US? Like, this is how you not only increase your political education, but you also can develop your brain muscle, because a lot of us need to develop that area, right? Because we need to do some more research, right? Like, this is what that looks like. I'm so proud that one of the applied projects that we're doing right now with my work study circle is we are connecting with a local middle school, and it is a African student union for the middle school. They say Black student union, but you know I don't say that word, so African student union. And what we did was we met with the advisor back in October and November, and as a YPI member, the Young Pioneers Institute within the All African People's Revolutionary Party and the All African Women's Revolutionary Union, YPI was a staple for me coming up because it allowed me to have exposure to a lot of the ways that the party functions, and it became very normalized for me as a child. So I wasn't shocked to hear that, you know, Cuba was a amazing place that we should use as an example. I heard that my whole life. And we did a report back on Friday that talked about where I actually was able to connect with other California brigadistas, and we all did this report back. Shout out to some of you because I know you were on that call on Friday, but I was really humbled, of course, because majority of the people on the call, we had a reflection period, and majority of the people on the call had only heard bad things about Cuba growing up, and I acknowledged my privilege. But I did say that my experience was different. It was normalized for me. Both of my parents went in the 1990s, so of course I wanted to go. That's one of the few things that the three of us have in common is we both have all been to the same country, not at the same time. They both went separate times, and then I went in this recent stage of season. So I just think that that's really humbling. And I think because of the YPI, like that kind of things have been normalized. Also, the fact that my parents were in this organization and that instilled in them how they wanted to then raise me. Like, all of these things are factoring in, you all. So it's just important to kind of acknowledge that, because I think when we think about it on a larger scale, whether it's the YPI or some other institution within a larger organization, what are we doing to educate the children? Because the children are the future. And what are we doing to promote and to empower the non-male people? Because the non-male people are the future, not just because they have the ability to reproduce, but because they have the ability to change and promote and help guide nations. That's why. Okay. If Carlota had decided not to help free Fermina, you and I would be in a very different position. I can tell you that right now. We would be in a very different position. And I think it was really wise for Kwame Nkrumah to say the degree of a country's political education can best be measured by the education of its women. I think that that was very eloquently put when he said that. And so again, like when we think about non-males and their roles in our family structures, like that's what that looks like, you all. That is what that looks like. And the less we can, the more we start to just be honest and to acknowledge what non-male people do for our societies, what women do for our societies, the more we start to be humble, the more we start to just give credit where credit is due. I definitely, I don't, I'm sure some of my work study members will laugh when they hear this, but um, yesterday on our work study meeting, I had recommended that we have an activity as a group to help us get better connected. And we were able to do part of that yesterday. And one of the comrades, male identifying, gave credit to the person who did the slide deck and was like, this is a really good idea. I'm so glad. And we had just had a conversation about patriarchy. And I was like, just so you know, comrade, it was my idea to do this. It was so and so's idea to do the slide deck. It was my idea that we have a conversation around this. And everybody laughed. And the other guy was like, yeah, we just had a conversation about patriarchy, comrade. And he's like, you right, my sister, you right. And I was like, yeah, don't give him credit for what I did. That was me. I did that. Okay. So I just think it's important to mention that. And then I also just want to say, before I pass it back to Baba Jamu, I also just want to say that I was trying to make this point earlier and my thoughts got shifted. But even in us doing the activity with the BSU at the middle school, they are finding their ancestors who were born outside of the US. That was the whole point I was trying to make with that. So just saying that to say we need to challenge ourselves, we need to challenge our children, and we need to figure out a way to increase our political education. And the best way to do that is by joining an organization. But if you're not ready to do that, at least supporting Pan-Africanist or socialist organizations that are supporting Pan-Africanism, because we still have a responsibility to show up for them somehow, some way. Ashe, and I will pass it back to you, Baba Jamu.
Ashe, obrigada, Asante Sana, Medasi, and Chule. Thank you very much. Just a couple of quick things. Wonderful presentation, but just a couple of quick things for historical accuracy. I know you said Medgar Evers, but I know you meant Emmett Till in terms of the open casket for the funeral. So just wanted to make sure that's out there because, people love to see us make any kind of human error because they try to equate that to discrediting our credibility. And not that we have to respond to those clowns, but just because we are an honest program, just that's important. And then the other thing is, yes, I mean, these attacks right now, it's Donald Trump, but people should recognize that there's never been, since January 1st, 1959, a U.S. president. I think there have been 8 or 9 of them since then, that has not engaged in this attack against the socialist Cuban revolution. And, that old bastard, he doesn't have long to live. And when he dies, whether he dies while he's still holding that office or afterwards, who gives a damn? But whatever it happens to be, the next one will be continuing the assault against Cuba. So I just say that because a lot of people are singularly conscious about this. Oh, it's Donald Trump. It's Donald Trump. No, it's the capitalist system that's attacking Cuba. So we should, just be clear about that at all times. And we thank you all for joining us today. We want to invite you back next week. Obviously this is March. If you paid any attention to how we do this program every March, every week, we acknowledge women, marginalized gender folks who have contributed to forward progress. So we're going to continue that next week. We're going to talk about the unknown contribution of Ruby Doris Smith Robinson. And if you don't know the name, then I'll just tell you this, that if you are someone who wears your hair in an African style today, locked hair or natural hair, if you wear cultural clothing, if you speak in a cultural form, even if you're not African, if you wear long hair or do the things you do, smoke weed, whatever it is you do to express your personality, you should be here to learn about Ruby Doris Smith Robinson, because without her and people like her, you would not be able to do that. You would not even have a consciousness to even try to attempt to do that today. She was one of those people who told this system, we're going to be who we are, whether you want us to be or not, whether you like it or not. and the dam broke from there, and now you can do whatever the hell you want to do, but you owe a debt to her. So join us next week when we talk about the unknown contributions of Ruby Doris Smith Robinson. The QR code in the upper left, or I'm allergic to capitalism. The QR code in the upper left, yeah, they say allergies, but the allergy is I'm allergic to capitalism. That's the real allergy there. So the red and white one, all the AAPRP programs, Hood Communists blog, Forward Ever Shop to buy clothing that supports the African revolutionary work we do. So do that. Scan that QR code. If you're in Sacramento, join us Thursday for our weekly community self-defense class. It's at every Thursday, 6 to 8 p.m. 2775 Cottage Way, like cottage cheese, Unit 15, 2775 Cottage Way, Unit 15. If you're in Sacramento area, I don't know why you're not coming. And if you're not, you know somebody close by, let them know. And then on the bottom there, we are going to have an in-person report back here in Sacramento for the trip I took to Azania, South Africa in January. That will be on Monday, April 6th at 6 p.m. at the same address, 2775 Cottage Way, Unit 15, 2775 Cottage Way, Unit 15. We'll serve snacks. We'll go in depth answering 3 crucial questions. 1, how do people in Africa look at us here in the U.S.? 2, did apartheid end in 1994? They keep telling us. And 3, what's the significance of Africa in our lives here today? So we'll be talking about that. Join the APRP, aprp-intl.org. Go there, get information about how to do that. The black and white QR code bottom right, Burkina Books, is the work that we are doing on the ground in the Sahel region. So become a monthly sponsor to support that work. That would be very good. My book, A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence, A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence, only $8 paperback. The QR code is there. Next to it, buy the book if you haven't. If you have bought it, please take 5 minutes out of your life, call your local library and say, hey, order this book and put it in there. Or call local bookstore and do the same. That's 10 minutes out of your life to do that, but it's a great organizing book. Don't take it from me. Just read all the reviews from the 60 some odd people who have contributed them on the page. That'll come up if you scan the QR code, and they will tell you. I don't know them. I didn't pay them to say that. I don't even know who they are. But it's a great organizing book. So do that, and 100% of the proceeds go towards the anti-fascist work that we're doing. Like when we do the report back on April 6th, we'll have food there. How do you think we pay for this all the time? So if you buy the book, you're helping to support this work. Thank you for being here. Join us next week and every week. Forward ever, backwards never. Stay clever in every endeavor. Have a great rest of your day.